The Rest Stop with Brad Restituto.
Come on! You know I got ya! Yeah! Break the wall!
Welcome to episode 2 of The Rest Stop. I am Brad Restituto, and we are live here in Las Vegas every Tuesday and Thursday night, 9 to 10 o'clock. And joining me also tonight, as always, Spencer the Wiz. You can follow him on Twitter at Spencer the Wiz. You can follow me on Twitter at Brad the Believer. Got a good show for you today on this Thursday. Joining us around 9:15, the Sportsnista, Cassandra Cousineau, will join us to talk everything going on in the world of sports with the boycotts, the civil unrest, and just more kind of angst and uncertainty revolving our daily lives, especially in the sports world here in the recent turn of events with the sporting boycotts that have kind of swept the landscape of sports. Today was the NHL, some baseball, and of course, NBA and WNBA also canceling their games today. But before we get into all that, I'm going to kick it off on a little bit of a lighter note today. And Spence, before we got onto the show live today, I had a weird craving of cereal. I don't know why. I did not indulge in that craving.
Cereal.
But it reminded me of some of these new spots opening up I've seen around town. They're like cereal bars or cereal brick and mortars. I've seen them out. They have these catchy names. I don't know the name off the top of my head, but it's pretty much a brick and mortar of a cereal shop. You go in, I guess you pick your milk, you pick your cereal, and enjoy a bowl of cereal in person somewhere. From the looks of the reaction you're giving me, you have not heard of this yet.
No, I don't understand how a business model like that can even exist. I would maybe understand a breakfast spot, but even breakfast spots I feel don't last very long unless they're chained, or you're just so amazing that no one can stop you. But that is such a rare instance. But to go back on cereal, do you have a favorite cereal?
We're not going to go deep into this cereal thing as far as favorite cereals. I don't think I can pick one favorite. No, it all depends on my mood. Apple Jacks will probably be up at the top. But how about yourself? Are you a cereal guy?
I'm a raisin. I can't have cereal, unfortunately, because of my diet. But before, Raisin Bran is like the greatest thing to eat at 10 p.m., I should say, not in the morning. I'm a cereal at night kind of person myself.
Well, if Raisin Bran's your go-to, you would be good to go in the EDRs across the employee dining rooms in the hotels and casinos, yes, because Raisin Bran's a staple at most of them.
Yes,
so,
I think I may have gotten it when I worked at Aria. I used to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner there, and they would always have Raisin Bran ready on the go at Aria. So it's probably where it all started.
Yeah, so I mean that was my initial craving before we jumped on air today. I don't know why I just started daydreaming of a cereal bar to go to. But aside from cereal, the news has been kind of consumed here in the last 24, 48 hours in the sports realm and really bleeding over to mainstream media as well. The sporting boycotts over the Jacob Blake shooting. And of course, this news of the Jacob Blake incident came to light in Kenosha, Wisconsin here in the last 48 hours or so. And we talked about it a little bit on Tuesday. Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin was shot in the back 7 times, and he's not lost his life, but the reports are saying that he's paralyzed and he will live. I guess that's good news for him and his family. But a really tough situation and a lot of emotion and a lot of really, I don't think backlash is the word, but it may be a lot of backlash in the African-American community in the sporting world continuing to demand change. We've seen the civil unrest coming from George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, the WNBA players, the NBA players, all speaking out, wanting justice. And this is another incident where they want to utilize their platform to demand change. And it started off by something we really have not seen in our lifetime, playoff games being boycotted. And that happened yesterday, started with the Milwaukee Bucks, Orlando Magic. Game 5, I believe. Am I right on that, Spence? Game 5 set to tip off yesterday was boycotted. And then the other games followed suit. And that bled over till today. The NHL stood tall. They made statements saying we're not going to play today. The NBA, the WNBA, some of Major League Baseball, not all of it, has decided to sit out today. So as a sports fan, we're kind of sitting around and just following the news, following what's going on, as we really don't have any sports. I made a bet on the Golden Knights game this morning, and I'm going to have to go back tomorrow and figure out if I'm going to repeat that bet because there's no game today. So, Spence, this is something you haven't seen in your lifetime. Did it surprise you the way it transpired, and what do you expect moving forward? That the NBA has now decided we're going to continue our season probably tomorrow, Friday, and or Saturday.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of my issues come in. Is stopping a playoff game is impactful. You're talking about thousands of dollars of betting money. Obviously, you're talking, potentially millions of viewers depending on the game. And so you do this, and it's a big statement. Everyone's like, "Wow, you've completely stopped sports. This is going to cost an unbelievable amount of money for TV deals and stuff like that." And then they convene together and they vote, do we want to continue the season? Everybody but the Lakers and Clippers votes yes. And the one that shocks me the most has to be Milwaukee. They're the one who started all of this, and yet somehow they're okay with continuing the rest of the season. So it's one of those things where you're going in the right direction because they want this change, and I think that's really great. And people say, shut up and dribble. That's kind of the whole stigma. I definitely don't agree with that because a lot of people, they're role models. They look up to them. So they have a lot of impact on young people's lives. And I think that's a really important role. They have more of an impact than probably the entire organization does, which is kind of crazy to say. But that's just the case. And if you want to do something, that's fantastic. But you have to do it with a plan. You come into it and then you come back immediately on your word, then it just looks silly to me.
So could you possibly look at this as counterintuitive? Like, hey, we sat out a couple games, but what really did that do? I was of the opinion yesterday, and I still am of the opinion, if these sports organizations, the NHL, Major League Baseball, NBA, WNBA, NFL, if they all collectively decided to stand in protest and not play the rest of the season, now I'm awake. Now you've got my attention, because you're taking millions of dollars away from people, and you're saying we're not going to get it back on the court until a change is implemented now. And I know I've talked to a lot of people that said, oh, change is going to take time. We've got to be patient. Explain to me why it would take time when we can go through a pandemic in a matter of 48 hours to 1 week. We can have HEROES Acts, bills written into law where the American people get money and they're able to have things changed around to bring them relief. If that can happen that fast, why can't stuff get on the Senate floor, bills be passed, reform be implemented immediately? Why can't people lose their jobs quickly and implement change and training now? Retrain everybody now. Why can't these be made into action immediately? I don't see the excuse why that can't happen immediately. We've heard some good points from people that are talking about body cams, and we'll get into what the Baltimore Ravens said from their website and their team statement they put out earlier today. And they made a couple good bullet points that I agree with, but why can't we get change immediately? I know it's possible. Don't tell me that we can't and it's going to take time when during a pandemic we can change things almost overnight. Too bad we can't get an agreement on a second stimulus package. Nobody seems to be as outraged about that marching in the streets, and that's affecting everybody. So it does frustrate me, the picking and choosing of what we want to be outraged for. But don't tell me we have to wait for change. I don't believe that. I don't buy into that. And I don't believe it's true. I believe the people with the money and the people in power, if they are the ones saying, look, we need change, change will get done. I heard on a radio show earlier today, Spence, a really interesting conversation about the rapper Meek Mill and how Jay-Z and other guys were fighting for his release. But not until Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, went to visit him in prison and then made a statement. Within 2 weeks, he was released. These owners have a lot of power, Spence, tons of power that we don't even know. And if these players decided to collectively say, We will not play until change is tangible. Now you got my attention. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I saw something on Twitter said, "What are you going to whine to the owners for? What power do they have?" Do people just not realize that billionaires have an unbelievable reach and network of people and the ability to change things like instantly? I promise you, if they wanted something done legitimately from the bottom of their hearts, it would be done pretty darn quick. So, you want to talk about league owners too? I mean, you're talking about a whole nother level. So, yeah, the idea that the only people who have power to make change are political people like your senators is an incredible fallacy that I will not get behind because it's obviously not true.
So, what has been accomplished now by 2 or 3 games, 2 or 3 days of sitting out? Yes, the conversation is continuing to be at the forefront, but it has been in the past. And I don't think that the conversation would have died if they would have played. So what has been accomplished here, and what do they think has been accomplished from a player's perspective, if you could speculate?
Stopping sports for a day is a big impact, without a doubt. I don't think their message has completely been blown away, and it's like it was for nothing. I mean, it obviously got everyone talking for at least a day. Obviously, the impact is completely diminished when you say, okay, we're just gonna play 2 days later. It doesn't look good to me. But again, we'll talk about this in a bit. The Baltimore Ravens do have an agenda, and the difference is that obviously the players did not.
Well, Audrey Hartz has chimed in a comment. She said it's not the same as a pandemic. Not everyone is on the same page as far as change. I don't know that everybody's on the same page as change, no matter what the discussion is, because clearly that's the case right now with the second stimulus package. We're going back and forth for weeks. This should have been passed weeks ago. They can't come to the agreement on that. So yes, I understand what you're saying. It's not the same, but we can't come to an agreement on anything. But this is such a hot button issue with reform and with the changing of certain things in the African-American community as far as the police go. I don't necessarily agree that the narrative should be pushed the way it's being pushed. I think we don't have evidence to say that all of this is racially motivated. Now, sports teams and leagues will come out and say, this is racial discrimination and what have you. I don't believe that. And I'm interested to have that discussion with Cassandra Cousineau, the Sportsnista, when she comes on. I think a lot of these situations, not all of them, a lot of these situations where you have different races, whether it's the cop or the victim or vice versa, being of different races, I don't believe it's a racially motivated or driven situation. I believe that there's a pocket of cops in this country that are bad cops that abuse power, and that comes first before that they look, oh, this is a black man and he's dangerous. Let me shoot him 7 times in the back. Now, I also don't know what it's like to be a cop in the heat of a situation when you have a suspect, a perpetrator, whatever you want to call the person involved in the incident, when it's a heated discussion and tensions are very hot. I don't know what it's like to be in that situation where maybe you feel threatened, like he was going to his car, which he shouldn't have done. And I talked about on Tuesday the importance of complying with officers. I think you can have 2 truths in a situation. You can talk about a person definitely needs to comply anytime they're in the street against a cop with a gun and a weapon, but also it's the same truth saying in no situation should a cop ever shoot anybody 7 times in the back. That's unnecessary, unmitigated force that is in no means necessary with one person. I think 1 shot or 2 should have sufficed. And I guess another question I have, would this discussion be as hot buttoned as it is if Jacob Blake was shot twice instead of 7? That question in particular, Spence, I'm curious your opinion on. If this was handled in a little less vitriolic way, would this still be in the discussion the way it is? I say yes, because it's a black man and a white cop. But if the shots were 3 times or 2 compared to 7, how would the dynamic of this discussion be different, Spencer?
It is hard to say, obviously, but I think getting shot in the back, I think, is much worse. And we had talked about this a little bit, and from an analytical perspective, I kind of talked about this from like a military training standpoint. Let's say there is a knife in his car, which I think that's what there was. So let's say he is going to grab a knife. First of all, I already said he shouldn't have been able to walk around the car if you're really trying to restrain him. But the thing is, he has his back turned to you, right? And you're already aimed down sight on him. Like, it takes you a split second. Let's say he pulls out a knife and still turns around. You're first of all, you have the distance at that point. You never lose that advantage. Your first reaction should not be, oh, I think he's grabbing a weapon. Let me shoot him in the back, let alone 7 times. So I think just shooting someone in the back when you don't know the full situation. Let's be honest, he panicked. I think that's the only way you can look at it. That, or he's been trained atrociously bad. So it's either of the two. I do think it probably would be. I think it would be as bad. Getting shot in the back is definitely the worst part about all of this.
And I still think the American public as a whole, we don't know all of the facts because we're getting so much, just like this entire pandemic and so many situations, we're getting different fires of versions of what happened. Did he have a knife? Didn't he have a knife? What did he have a knife in the car? Was he reaching for a knife in the car? The kids in the car? There's so many variables. And that's why sometimes I think it's important, especially for a LeBron James, people that have an enormous multi-million people following and have such a huge platform, to kind of try to gather as most of the facts that you can gather to be as accurate as you can before making such a broad paint of injustice. And not saying that anything would change based on being shot 7 times. There's nothing that can be said that will justify that. But do I think that people should be walking around with shirts saying justice for Jacob Blake when we don't know the dynamic of what caused the situation? Because this is an interesting slope, because I think there could be multiple truths here. You can absolutely be outraged at the fact that he was shot 7 times in the back, but I'm not ready to put on a shirt for somebody that was not doing the right thing either. It's not like he was in a drive-by situation and was singled out. And Spence, I know you have a big issue with the fact that people coming to the table talking about his criminal background and the equating of him being shot 7 times. Now, understand what I'm saying. I'm not separating those two, but I think it's important. And I wouldn't, is this somebody you're going to have over your house at a barbecue? Or are you going to let babysit your kids if these charges are true? I just don't know that I think we should be having shirts with Jacob Blake all over it, given the situation. And can we separate the fact that I'm talking about that compared to not equating his background to being shot 7 times, that there's a difference?
Yeah. And to that, I would say he doesn't. Yeah. To speak a little bit about whether or not like the counter argument that I've seen is, oh, he was a convicted criminal with the warrant out. Well, that doesn't matter. Like, who cares, to be honest with you, because the police officers are not the judges in this situation. They're not executioners. They're not allowed to do that on the behalf. If you say that, you're against the Constitution of the United States, essentially, that everyone should have a trial and be able to represent themselves. And they almost did not give him the opportunity to do that because he wasn't in jail yet. It's not like he was escaped from jail. It was something that he's committed of, but we don't know if he did for sure. And yes, is he maybe perhaps not the greatest person ever? I don't know. I've never met the guy. I can't really tell you. I don't know any facts about him, but it's okay for him to be a martyr if it's for this cause, if it's the fuel to actually make change. I'm willing to separate those two things and be like, he was a man who was unjustly shot, not he is this person. I want justice for him. It's this idea that he was unjustly put force upon himself when that shouldn't have been the outcome.
As we're waiting for the Sportsnista Cassandra Cousineau, this is the Rest Stop. I'm Brad Restituto. We come to you every Tuesday and Thursday live from Las Vegas, 9 to 10 o'clock Pacific time. And if you missed the show live here on twitch.tv, make sure you subscribe at any of the podcast platforms and search Landry Conference Call, and you can find the Rest Stop. You can find the other show that I'm on, the Pack Rap, any other shows. And you can also find them at chrislandryfootball.com. Spencer the Wiz, you can follow him on Twitter as he's with me every Tuesday and Thursday, and the excellent producer of the show as we're talking about in the world of sports and kind of the world in general right now is still the hot button topic of the Jacob Blake shooting, and in the equation, the reaction to that is the sporting franchises pretty much shut down for a couple of days. They boycotted. There was no NBA games yesterday, none today, none from the WNBA. The NHL decided to stand firm today and not play any games, and a lot of Major League Baseball as well. And there was a few Major League Baseball games played today, but a lot of them decided to boycott also. And we were talking earlier, Spence, and I want to go to this about the Baltimore Ravens. They put out a statement today in reference to the Jacob Blake shooting, and there was a lot of opinions from the NFL, from different people in the NFL, and the Baltimore Ravens, and this one kind of stood out, and the Ravens did make a statement and stand for social justice, and let's see what they had to say. They started off by saying, with yet another example of racial discrimination with the shooting of Jacob Blake and the unlawful abuse of peaceful protesters, we must unify as a society. It's imperative that all people, regardless of race, religion, creed, or belief, come together to say enough is enough. This is bigger than sports. Racism is embedded in the fabric of our nation's foundation and is a blemish on our country's history. If we are to change course and make our world a better place, we must face this problem head on and act now to enact positive change and racial injustice. Though we cannot right all the wrongs of our country's history, we can. And then there's a bunch of bullet points, one being arrest and charge the police officers responsible for Breonna Taylor's killing and the shooting of Jacob Blake. And then it goes on to talk about Senator Mitch McConnell and different bullet points there, as you can see on the screen. So a powerful statement by the Baltimore Ravens, and they are one of quite a few people, players, teams, organizations itself, the NFL, that's come out and spoken on this situation. As I believe we're going to join us now, and we can discuss this further. The Sportsnista, there she is, Cassandra Cousineau. You can find her on lvsportsbiz.com and also her podcast, The Levels Podcast. The lovely Cassandra Cousineau, thank you for joining us on the Rest Stop, our number 2 episode here tonight in Las Vegas.
Hey, so glad to see you and hear your voice, man. Been a minute.
It's been a while. I'm glad to have you also, as this pandemic has definitely left me here to eat myself almost out of the house. So we're going to work on that a little bit here. Spencer the Wiz is here also.
What's up,
joining
Spencer?
us. He's in the house. He says hello. So Cassandra, we're, of course, the hot button topic going on not only in the world of sports, but in the mainstream media is the boycotts with the NFL. And then today it bled over to the NHL, the WNBA, and a lot of Major League Baseball. What were your initial thoughts when you first heard that there was going to be no games played?
Man, it was such a fluid situation. Everything was happening all at one time. I actually was live on my show, Levels, as it was all unfolding. And so it was a very and on our show, we just talk combat sports. So it was a surreal thing. But I'm also not surprised that the impetus was out of the NBA. Those players have been much more socially active, although the Colin Kaepernick situation put NFL players front and center. I think collectively the NBA has been much more involved with social issues over the past couple of years and really speaking out and using their platform in multiple ways.
Cassandra, do you think that me and Spencer were talking before you came on about the fact that they've decided to go ahead and resume play over the weekend, maybe as early as tomorrow.
Yeah.
And what the impact of just 1 or 2 days meant. And of course, I talked about how I thought you would have a lot more eyes opened if collectively the sports organizations decided as a protest, we were going to not play the entire season, whether it was the rest of Major League Baseball, WNBA, NBA, NFL. I thought that would really force change to happen quicker. What are your thoughts on the length of the boycott, and will there be an impact felt, and what is that impact possibly?
So the NBA is also tied to the WNBA. You saw the women come out immediately after the Bucks had said that they weren't going to play, saying that they would not play either. And the women had a bullet list already. They were already organized because women, that's how we get down. We got plans. And so that helped. I don't have a problem with them playing tomorrow. I didn't have a problem with them not playing for the entire season. I support those young men and women, however they want to peacefully and rationally discuss what is important to them as human beings. I actually think that it's best that they resume play as opposed to sitting out an entire season. I think the NBA players specifically were at risk for being locked out next season, and that just creates a whole situation that nobody wants to begin with. But when they're back in the bubble, they're safe. We are in a pandemic. And then also they can continue to speak out. And now that they've kind of regained everybody's attention, I think folks were happy to see sports back, and you're watching your favorite team or talking smack about the team that you don't like. And people got complacent and got comfortable again. And I think this was kind of a jarring moment to get the conversation back to the social issues. Once again, you have an unarmed, and I don't care if he said there was something in the car, he wasn't in the car, he was outside of the car, an unarmed Black man being murdered by police officers. And this time you have 3 little boys in the vehicle watching their father he's now paralyzed and still handcuffed as of today. He was handcuffed to the bed. And you get little boys watching that. It is way past time for there to be action taken. And I think what the main thing that these players are trying to do is to get these owners to speak to their friends who are entrenched with these municipalities to actually take actionable steps on the local level to address these issues.
That's the Sportsnista, Cassandra Cousineau, joining us.
Oh, and I got some Stella with me. I haven't had any yet, though, but I'm ready because it's been that kind of week, man.
Cassandra, I was peeping your meal before you got on today.
Yeah,
and
it's good.
Man, I mean, we've had some discussions about some healthy vegan type meals. Just real quick, tell the audience what you cooked up tonight, because you had your Stella with that, and it looked really good.
I had a Thai yellow curry veggie. I had roasted vegetables, squash, zucchini, onions, carrots, green beans, and then I had like a little bit of coconut milk in that yellow curry with some rice and some cayenne pepper, crusted sauteed tilapia with it, and some jasmine rice, and it was good. And I had homemade spicy pickles.
And in case anyone was wondering, once you showed the audience your Stella, is she even old enough to drink? I will say this, the Sportsnista, even though she looks 19 right now,
I got some miles.
she is a family woman, so she is of legal age to drink, and we will not be reporting her to anybody saying
put the
that
babies to bed.
Put the babies and children to bed. It is time to have a Stella and to talk about the craziness going on in this world. So we're going to pick back up there. And Cassandra, I'm going to hit you with this, and you may need to hit me over the head after I make this statement here.
I watch fights. I don't start them.
Okay. Well, I definitely, I'm never going to get in one with you because you're my ally and I know when to pick my battles. So the Ravens came out with a statement today, and where I kind of step back and I say, wait a minute, is when we immediately get involved in the discussion of these situations and race is immediately brought up. And in the instance of cops and unarmed black men, white men, regardless, if it's a white cop and a black man, we talk about race. If I were to say to you, there's no evidence that this was racially motivated, and my problem stems more from cops in these pockets where they make these decisions, abuse power more so than a racial situation. What is your argument or comment on that?
Yeah, I think there's enough evidence in a historical pattern of police officers behaving differently when they have black and brown suspects in their custody or they are approaching them. If you look at just what happened this week, for instance, you had this unarmed man being shot 7 times in his back while a police officer held him. Meanwhile, you had a 17-year-old armed with an automatic assault weapon who had just murdered, was it 2 people? Multiple people in the streets. He was handed a bottle of water by the police officers. What's the difference there? You have one suspect who murdered people, who is a young white boy, and you have a grown man who has not murdered anybody, who almost lost his life. And then let's go back 3 weeks ago. Let's go back 3 weeks before that. There is a pattern. And a lot of people say that we need more training. You can't train people who don't have it in them to behave a certain way. It is in the hiring practices. It is how people are actually brought into the academy. It is how they are assessed to be fit. How is it that you go for your weapon to shoot a man in the back when you're not in danger? It's because there's some kind of implied fear that actually lies between a black person in America and law enforcement. I've seen it with my own eyes. I'm relatively peaceful. And, I've been on a porch with a black man and Popo just come, Popo. It's late. I had a couple sips. The police officers came running up on the porch. Everybody had to get down because they had a report of an incident in the area. This was 6 years ago. To this day, we don't know what that incident was. We were sitting on our own porch, being black. Things like this happen over and over again. So much so when you see that pattern, you have to say it comes down to race.
Cassandra, if I were to say on average, there's 62 counties per state, times 52, 51 states, depending what your thoughts are on Puerto Rico and Alaska and the like. So we're talking over 5,000 plus counties. We're doing the math here. Is it fair to say, like you said, that there is a pattern of the racial injustice, or there are just pockets that are amplified by mainstream media and by social media showing these scenarios? But in reality, the numbers would say that this is not necessarily a black-white issue. It's an issue of cops. If I were to say that there's not quite this disparity and that pattern overall, that there's just pockets where there's people that abuse their power and that are wrong, what would you respond to that?
I would say that certainly social media and the pervasiveness of where information comes from, whether you're talking about your cable news, your phones, your alerts, or your friends, or whatever, information is much more accessible, so we feel it more. And that's actually a really interesting point, in that, do we just hear about it more? No, we see it more. That's the difference. My mom came up in an area, in an era when schools were just being integrated, and it was just as bad for her then. But what happened was, you had friends of hers and neighbors who say, it's not happening like that. No, no, you're exaggerating. It's not being exaggerated, it's being filmed now. That's the difference. So yeah, we're hearing about it more, but I don't think that it's in pockets. I grew up in a very small town with 48 kids in my graduating class. And in that town, there is Klan activity. There is intimidation activity happening now. I'm talking about my mom getting flyers on the front porch, because I don't know how they don't know Black people live there. Like, we've been living there for, like, decades, like damn near a quarter century. But you talk about there just being pockets. This is rural America that I'm talking about, not Los Angeles, not Las Vegas, not Chicago. It is happening everywhere in different ways. But the United States in particular I think this country has a very high tolerance for racism. We have a low tolerance for intolerance of racism. And that's why people just lost their shit when athletes said, we're not playing tonight, we tired. We're just too tired. I mean, there have been days on my job where I'm like, yeah, I can't do this today, my head hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, they're on their job saying, I can't do this today. My head hurt.
It's something to be said, because there's not a lot of us that can go out punching time clocks and just decide we're upset about something that's going on in the world and we're not showing up. So this is a lot of power being mulled around by professional athletes, and hopefully that'll trickle down to the owners as well. I want to get to a video. Robert Horry was on Spectrum Sports talking about this situation and how he had to talk to his sons and family about dealing with situations and civil unrest. Let's hear what Robert Horry had to say. Robert Horry.
For me, in today or yesterday, I was sitting there and I started crying. And my wife walks in. She's like, "Are you crying because you turned 50 today?" And I started laughing. Like, no. I said, "Did you see the video of this guy getting shot?" At first, I saw it. I'm looking at it. I thought, well, maybe they're going to tase him, right? Because that's what they do with white people. They tase them. And so I didn't have the volume up. And then Christian walks in the room. He says, "No, Dad, they shot him." So I play it again. I'm like, wow. They shoot this guy 7 times in the back. And then I have this conversation with Christian. And he's like, that's wrong. That's wrong. I said, yo, it is beyond wrong. It's just flat out evil. And I'm telling him, and it's hard to tell your 14-year-old son that I worry about him when he walks out that door. I have a 21-year-old son. I worry about him because Black men are endangered species, pretty much. These cops are just killing because they feel like if they don't have their body cams on, they have a right. And I tell my kids all the time, I said, dude, I don't care what's going on, because at the end of the day, I want you coming home to me.
Yeah, powerful stuff.
Cassandra, this is a tough subject to talk about for me, because I don't have a family. I'm not Black. But I want to be able to have a discussion because the family dynamic in this country and in the world is something that's very important to me. And it's something very cherished that I think a lot of people take for granted when they bring children into this world. And your mom, and it's not easy, no matter how you prepare for it, to be a parent, especially now in this day and age. How do you tread, especially having children of color, to send them out into this world?
Yeah.
How do you navigate the fragility of giving them information when they're so impressionable at an age, and then also the difference between giving them information and giving them absolutes and then letting them find out for themselves?
Yeah, that's a really good question. At the end of it, how do you walk that line? So I will say, so my son, little one, is 7, and I have a 14-year-old stepson. And so and they have a black daddy. And I worry about him a lot more than I worry about the boys right now, but it's coming. And I think as a mother, raising black children, the day is coming. And it's this constant weight on your chest, knowing you're going to have that conversation. And what I had always hoped was that it would be in a graceful, nurturing way that wasn't a response to something that happened. And I didn't have that luxury. When my son was 6 years old, the little one, he was playing video games. This was just last summer, playing video games with his big brother. They're online with the big brother's friends. He goes to school in LA. And little one comes downstairs and he says, Mom, his friend called me the N-word. And I was like, what? He said, you're a little N-word boy. For no reason. Okay, you've met my son, just the sweetest little kid, like non-confrontational. Like there was no, even if he had provoked it, it would not be acceptable. But it wasn't provoked. The child just spat it out of his mouth like that. Wasn't prepared for the conversation in that moment, but I was prepared for the conversation. So immediately I went into mama bear mode and ran upstairs and had to get that kid on the phone and get the kid's father on the phone to explain what happened. And of course I got, we don't speak like this in this house. Yes, you do, because your kid did. So he's in your house and you speak like that. But I had to sit my son down and say, there will be times in your life when people are going to use this word towards you or around you. And the only thing you can control is your behavior. And I, as your mother, 100% support how you react to it. You might want to walk away. You might go into a fit of rage. You might have to defend yourself, depending on what the situation is. But as your mother, I support your reaction, because you and your reaction to it are not wrong. It is the people who chose to behave that way towards you who are wrong. And that's the whole kind of my issue with dealing with racism, is we've spent a lot of time trying to make racists feel comfortable in their racism, trying to ask them to come to the table and explain their position. And I'm not willing to listen to the position of the racist anymore, because I had to prepare a 6-year-old to react to that. So So as his mother, and also, having a relationship with their father, really worrying about his life in this climate, is something I wake up with daily.
Sandra, can you continue on that? And how did your son, what was his reaction or response? How did he react and respond? And what were his words to you after that? Did he understand?
Thoroughly confused. He understands. See, he said he called me the N-word. So I asked him exactly what was said, and he said it. I've never talked to him about the N-word. So this is something, that they, even so, I think, someone asked me yesterday, when do you start having, when does the shift happen when you have brown babies? And when you expect to have a conversation? I say around first grade. They're 6 going on 7 years old, because kindergarten, everything is really sweet and cute, but in first grade it changes, because little kids start processing context now in a different way. And so that was about right. It was about first grade when we started to have that conversation. But he was like, I didn't do anything to him. Like, he doesn't know me. I've never met him. He doesn't even see me. We're on headsets. So how does he know that I'm black? I'm your brother black. So I'm sure he assumed you're black too. But he doesn't have to know you for it to be okay for him to say something like that to him. And I will tell you, my son is indelibly changed. And I've never been more angry as a mother to have a conversation with another little kid. And fortunately, we were on the phone, because I might have initiated some close proximity to his father or mother, because I'm now internalizing the pain of my son, and now I have to act on that. And so when you're asking Black people to be rational, sometimes you have to take into account all that they've had to endure before they got to that moment.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Cassandra. This is man, this is deep. And Spence, I want you to jump in because it goes back, and I'll read some of what the Ravens said today. Part of their statement, they came out and said, "This is bigger than sports. Racism is embedded in the fabric of our nation's foundation and is a blemish on our country's history. If we are to change course and make our world a better place, we must face this problem head on and act now to enact positive change. It's time to accept accountability and acknowledge the ramifications of slavery and racial injustice." And I have a hard time trying to dissect this information when I feel like, in order to really see change, yes, education is important, but slavery is not something that most of our kids, if we have them now, have experienced, and even us, as if we were parents, have experienced. So I think that the discussion becomes more fragile and delicate when you're talking about things that we should be aware of, but something that we should have to navigate through. Spence, and talk only what you're comfortable with here, but you're of Jewish descent and you've had some life-changing experiences. Talk about the balance of what you have to acknowledge from your past and what part of your past you carry in today, and how you balance out the two when if you were to have a discussion with children or with other people about your background and what role that plays in the present.
Yeah, it is hard to kind of balance that. And as parents, of course, you should always teach tolerance and that everyone's just a person, so it doesn't matter like what you look like. And as much as I would say that that is the end story and that's how you solve it, personal experience to me will always be the greatest teacher. Like we've talked about before, Brad, I went to Poland, I went to Germany, I've been to Auschwitz, I've been to numerous concentration camps, and it makes me want to tear up just thinking about it, because I've seen what hate leads to. The Holocaust is the ultimate form of hate. It's the end of the road. It's the worst form of it. And it changed my perspective on life, obviously, on my perspective of violence and everything like that. And yeah, I mean, these kids, they learn these things at home, and, you can try to teach them at school, but until kids really know like what hate and all these things lead to, and learning to just accept people if really are, nothing's going to change. So yes, you can make police reform, which you obviously have to, but we have to make change from the foundation. And I think that comes from a desire for kids to want to learn on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So their father told me a story this week about we both grew up in towns where we were the only Black family, any family of color, no Hispanics, like no Asians, nothing. It was just us. But so we just had our friends, and we just saw them as our friends, and we thought they saw us as their friends as well. And there was a situation where he had gone out like on a lake somewhere with a group of friends, and they had to run to someone's grandma's house and grab some flour because they were cooking something or another. And all of a sudden, so they walk in, and the grandma's eyes just got as big as saucers, and she like grabbed the grandson in the back. You could hear her say, "Get that N-word out of my house. How are you going to bring this N-word to my house?" And when you're 17 years old and you grew up with all these people, it's very shocking. And then there's fear that sets in. You don't know who she's going to call. You don't know what she's capable of either. And so, yes, you can have friends who have somewhat who you think have been accepting of you. And then you go to their home and you realize that's not it. I today actually, Spence, watched on National Geographic, there was a documentary called After the Nazis on. And it showed actually what happened right after Germany was liberated. And it was worse in some instances. So you also had the Soviet Union, who was actually lining Jewish people up on the roadside and still assassinating people and murdering families at mass. And so it's not like, similarly in the United States, when slavery ended, it wasn't like the spigot just got turned off and evil didn't exist anymore. People just found other ways to carry it out. And because there was never any reckoning for that, we have the legacy of it. And so I'm always of the mindset is when this behavior starts to ratchet it up, there must be severe consequences for the behavior. Police officers specifically who are murdering Black people, Breonna Taylor most recently, I mean, George Floyd as well. We need to have civil action against these police officers as individuals. Any city, municipality that pays out any kind of money needs to come out of the unions, the police unions, to start to have them police. I keep hearing about all these good cops. And there are good cops. I've met some good cops. I'm friends with some good cops. I ain't talking about y'all. So if you feel offended by them, maybe you ain't who you think you are. But there need to be severe penalties. There needs to be severe penalties for neo-Nazi behavior in this country. There needs to be severe penalties for individuals who call together groups of individuals to come and assault and murder peaceful protesters as well. We cannot tolerate it because we're not changing hearts and minds. People are who they are. But you could get your ass sat down for a minute. And you can either suffer monetary consequences or you can sit in jail and think about it for a little bit. Because a lot of people are not really about that life. They talk a tough talk on Facebook and show pictures of their guns. But when time comes down to it, they're not trying to go sit in jail for that. But we need to have that.
That's the Sportsnista. You can follow her work as a feature writer at lvsportsbiz.com and her Levels podcast, a combat sports podcast, at the Sportsnista on Instagram, on Twitter. And I love this woman. We've done radio before in the past, and she is outspoken and extremely articulate, poetic. And I would love to have her on again and talk some stuff a little lighter. On the lighter side.
And you know, I want to say real quick is, Spence, I see you, man. You know, your oppression is my oppression. And if there is a walk that you need to take and people are behaving in a certain way because you are my Jewish brother, I got you too. Because I'm not trying to trade oppression with anybody. That's not how we're going to go through this. And so I think when we see it collectively, because we can't fight all these fights as individuals, we have to do it collectively. And so I got you too, man.
No, I really appreciate that. And obviously I have a very unique advantage in that I have blonde hair and blue eyes. So it's very easy for me to say that I'm not Jewish, to hide that. But I will be honest with you. There are times when I'm afraid to tell people, yes, I'm Jewish, because you just never know what goes on behind closed doors. So while I cannot personally, speak to the plight of what's going on against the African-American community, I certainly historically can understand what hate leads to. And obviously I'm quite against that, being that like half of my family was wiped out not even 100 years ago.
Understood.
Some powerful stuff. And look, we've got three people sitting here right now from three different walks of life. And look, three people I respect, can't include myself, but Spencer and Cassandra, I appreciate you having this discussion, and it's definitely a heavy topic. So make sure you tune in next week, because we will definitely be lighting it up, as I will be evaluating some of the pandemic watching experiences, as I'm going to dive into reality TV and break down some of the nonsense I've seen from there. Sportsnista, what have you watched in some of your downtime when you're not being a mom and you're not out on the streets hustling your businesses and all of your ventures outside? What is your guilty pleasure?
You know what? I'm a mom. My guilty pleasure is the Food Network, man. I sit down, like I'm always watching, Beat Bobby Flay or Guys Grocery Games or something. It's really like I don't watch like any of the Real Housewives or any kind of like I just can't take that in my spirit. I can't do it. But like, yeah, cooking shows. That's my thing.
I know. I go to visit my mom, and she makes me watch Beat Bobby Flay. And why is Bobby Flay the master of all cooks? Why does everybody got to beat him or grill
no.
Bobby Flay? Why is he the anointed master of all cooks?
I don't even know, but in my house we love what's the girl's name? Pioneer Woman. She's not a big lady, but she got big lady thoughts. Like, if there's like some she could put a stick of butter in, like she got you. So yeah, that's the Food Network is my thing, and then we've been watching a lot of like National Geographic just to try to balance out. The kids are doing virtual school right now, and they need a break, and I'm tired of watching Teen Titans Go with them.
Teen Titans Go. Well, Sportsnista, I appreciate you joining us today. I think we'll have our sports back sometime this weekend, so we'll follow this closely here.
Boxing and UFC has been back.
They're not stopping. Well, they're not stopping. They're going to keep pressing forward. Dana White. So we'll continue to monitor that closely and make sure you check out Cassandra's podcast and her show, The Levels Combat Podcast, and Jeremy Long is on there as well. Some great stuff from them. So we'll follow you closely, Sportsnista, and thanks for joining us here on the Rest Stop. And if you missed the show here live on twitch.tv, you can go to any of the other broadcasts and podcasts. You can search the platforms at Landry Conference Call. Make sure you search and you click Rest Stop or any other shows you can watch on that platform, or chrislandryfootball.com. For Spencer the Wiz, I'm Brad the Believer. We will catch you next Tuesday live here in Las Vegas, 9 o'clock. We're signing off. Everybody have a safe weekend. Be well and take care.